My fiancée got pregnant by my brother, and my mother was happy because she was going to be a grandmother. But 5 years later, she called crying to ask me for a favor. The old hag, 5 years ago, just a month before I turned 30, I discovered that my fiancée had been having an affair with my brother. The only reason they were confessing to me was because she was pregnant and wanted to have the baby. My ex-fiancée, Karen, 30 years old, and my brother, Chris, 33, had apparently been sleeping together since Karen and I got engaged. Karen and I had been together since our senior year of high school and through college, so getting engaged was obviously the next step, as we had been together for so long. However, after we got engaged, she decided to cheat on me with my brother. The only reason it even happened was that a few days after our engagement, my brother confessed to her that he had always had feelings for her and felt he had to tell her because she was about to get married. After that, he couldn't tell her anything about these things anymore. She suddenly realized that she was also gradually developing feelings for him. Apparently, they even flirted behind my back occasionally at family events and things like that, but she wasn't sure about him, which is why she stayed with me. I found out about all this 5 years ago, just a few months before my wedding, when the two of them sat me down with my parents and told me they planned to be together. Karen could no longer marry me because she was in love with Chris, and they were expecting a child together. That day, I felt very disgusted and almost refused to believe it. I told Karen that I wanted her to come home with me and end this relationship, whatever it was, with Chris. But my mother made it very clear that none of that was going to happen, and that Chris and Karen were going to be together, and I just had to make peace with it because it was their decision. I couldn't even believe my mother was supporting something like this. At least my father had the decency to look ashamed and try to console me, but my mother was blatantly supporting this, and even told me that if I had any problem with it, I should keep it to myself because Karen was pregnant, and I had no right to bother her when she was in such a delicate condition. My mother was crazy about finally having a grandchild in the family, so she hardly cared what I was going through, and she even fought with me to try to justify what was happening. After the confrontation that day, Karen moved in with my family because her own parents no longer wanted to talk to her after she told them the truth. We obviously had to cancel the wedding, and my parents covered the cost, so I didn't have to worry about any of that. However, I was kicked out of the family because I refused to talk to them, and for the past 5 years, we have had absolutely no contact. The only person who even bothered to try to reach out to me was my father, but I didn't even bother to talk to him. So, there has been total silence for me after I cut ties with them. It took me a long time to get over what happened to me because Karen and I had been together for so long, and I really loved her. It took a lot of therapy to get over it, and even now, I wouldn't say I've completely gotten over it, but I'm dealing with it. The rest of the family had kept in touch with me, and I found out from them that she had a child with my brother. Just a month after giving birth to their son, a paternity test confirmed that he was my brother's son and not mine, so there was no need to contact me after that either. They ended up getting married and have been together for the past 5 years. I had assumed that everything was going well for them, but about a week ago, my mother suddenly called me and took me by surprise because she was the one who most supported Karen and Chris on an unhealthy level. So, out of mere curiosity, I decided to call her back after she emailed me saying she urgently needed to talk to me. When I called her, she gave me some pretty bad news while crying. I found out that my brother had been in a very serious accident. It was a hit-and-run case, and unfortunately, due to the impact, he had fallen into a coma, and there was no way of knowing how long it would take for him to recover. This had happened the previous week, and just 3 days later, the doctors said that things were pretty critical at that point. My mother decided to call me and inform me about it. At first, I thought she was going to ask me to visit and be there for the family, which I would have been willing to do because despite everything, I think this is very important and it would have been a reasonable enough expectation for me. I didn't want to turn my back on someone who was in such a terrible condition. But then my mother completely changed the subject and said she wanted me to be there for Karen and my nephew. I didn't even understand what that meant, and then she told me that now she expected me to take my brother's place with them. When I asked her to elaborate, she said that now that Chris was basically no longer there, I should be there for Karen and her child in every way. She wasn't just referring to financial support, but she really expected me to take over and live with them to take care of them. She said she would have taken them in at her house, but she wasn't getting any younger, and it would be too much work to take care of everyone, and that's why she was calling me to inform me. She expected me to make a decision on the same call because time was of the essence. Obviously, I lost my patience because she hadn't spoken to me for 5 years, and now that she finally was talking to me, she expected me to do something so big. I could understand that Karen and her child were completely alone at this point and needed someone to be there for them, but that someone should have been someone from their immediate family and not me. Someone she had betrayed and hadn't even bothered to apologize to. So, obviously, I immediately told my mother that I wasn't going to do anything like that and that it was foolish to expect me to say yes to that. Then she started arguing with me on the phone, and I didn't have time to waste. I was already quite angry, and I didn't want to ruin my mood further while talking to her, so I just hung up and then blocked her once again. I tried to go about my day as usual after that, but I just couldn't stop thinking about what Chris and Karen were going through, and I really felt bad for them. But obviously, I wasn't going to do what my mother had asked and take my brother's place in his family because that was just weird. He was still around, but it wasn't like he had already passed away, and she was acting as if he was no longer there. I felt very unsure about this whole situation, so later that day, I decided to call my father instead because I thought he would be more reasonable than my mother. It was very awkward to talk to him after 5 years of no contact, but after some small talk, I asked how Chris was doing, and he said things didn't look very good at the moment. Then I told him about the conversation I had with my mother earlier that day, expecting him to have a reasonable perspective. But instead, he also said that my mother was right to expect that from me. That really shocked me because my dad used to be the more sensible of my parents, and now even he was saying such strange things. When I asked if he really meant that, he said yes, and that Karen and I had a history anyway, and that I was also part of the family no matter what our relationship had been for the past 5 years. Ultimately, I am blood, and if they can count on someone to help the family, it should be me. My mother's expectations are not exactly unreasonable. That really took me by surprise. Right now, I honestly have no idea what to do. Over the past week, I have avoided talking to any family members, even other relatives, because I'm just afraid that someone will mention this to me, and then I will be forced to explain my decisions. I also feel a bit like the bad guy here because I'm refusing to help my family and I know they really need me, at least emotionally, if not financially. I just honestly have no idea what to do, and I know what my mother is asking is really strange and unreasonable. But at the same time, I feel bad for outright rejecting it. I haven't even gone to the hospital to see my brother because I just feel very weird about this whole situation. I also haven't been able to talk to any of my friends about it because this is all so personal. They know how things have been between my family and me since the wedding was called off, but this is something a bit stranger than that. Honestly, that's why I'm now posting this here on the subreddit, because I really think I need some objective opinions on what I should do, and both my friends and family are all going to have some sort of biased opinion. I really need advice because I think I'm going to lose my mind if I don't find an acceptable solution to this.